As a creative aspect, TV is one of the best things that we do as a species. Along with music and film and books, they bring out the best creative of all of us. They entertain and they bring so much joy to many. They invoke emotion and enable us to feel things that we bury sometimes deep down. That's what this podcast is for. Welcome to A Million Little TV Shows. This is what I call the breakdown while I break down. Each week I will go through a different TV show, a different season of that TV show, and different episodes of that show. And I will break down not only emotions, but I will break down stories from my life, and let you know why these TV shows mean so much to me, and why I believe that they are some of the most important shows out there. This podcast is here to highlight a lot of smaller TV shows, or TV shows that don't really get a platform, because we know of a bunch of TV shows that get a multitude of different podcasts. Ted Lasso, Game of Thrones, The Office, they've all got several podcasts out there analysing all types of different things. But there's not many out there for the little guy, and that's what I'm trying to highlight. So each week I will go through a different show, different seasons, different episodes, and I will go across all different kinds of genres and different countries to bring you what I believe is some of the best TV out there. So I'm glad you're here with me. I'm glad you're here for this journey. And if you've watched the shows before and you wanted to come here and get an analysis on them and have someone go through them and pick out bits that you might have enjoyed, then I'm glad you are here. If, however, you have never watched the show and you just want to come and have someone talk in your ear about different TV shows, I'm glad you are here. But I hope that it inspires some people to go and seek out these TV shows. They deserve to be watched. They were made with love and care, and they are the same as this podcast, made with love and care. I am your host, Mike, and I will take you through every adventure, every horror, every piece of drama, and I hope that you enjoy the show. Hello there, and welcome back to this A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is now episode 3 of season 13, and today I'm excited to get back into the Bates Motel. Now, this show came out around about the same time that Hannibal did, and I was very excited to see these two properties come out at the same time, or roughly the same time, because, well, they shaped the way that I look at cinema. And I just think that they are immaculate series. Obviously, you have heard about how I spoke about Hannibal. If you haven't, please go revisit those episodes. And I covered season 1 of Bates Motel already. But today I'm going to be covering the middle part of season 2. And I just can't wait to get back into it. We've had such a firecracker of a season so far, and it just gets better and better. So let's get into it. I think this is going to be a brilliant episode. And yeah, I just want to share this with you guys. So I hope you're all doing well out there. I hope you're looking after yourselves in the insane current climate that we are in. But let's just kind of switch off for a bit and enjoy what was an amazing show in the Bates Motel, season 2, episodes 4 to 7. Episode 4, Check Out. Now, obviously, after the whole revelation that Dylan's father is actually Norma's brother, things haven't really started to sink in yet for Dylan. However, he just doesn't know where to put himself. And we find him at the beginning of the episode unconscious in his truck. He's covered in vomit. Emma tries to help him out because she is the one who has found him, and well, she just doesn't know what to do. Eventually she goes and speaks to Norman, and Norman comes and helps her out. But this whole thing about Caleb is just an absolute mess for him, because Dylan really just doesn't know what to do with himself. He blames Norman a little bit because he thinks Norman knew about what happened. Obviously Norman knew a little bit, but didn't know that Dylan was potentially the result of that. As for Emma, the reason that she was at the motel so early is because, well, we remember the pot dealer that she was kind of into before. She is woken up next to him in bed. Now, according to the guy, nothing has happened between the two of them, but Emma would really like something to happen. And she expresses as much that she is a virgin, that he would potentially be the one who takes her virginity, which is obviously a massive deal for her because, well, not just because she's a young girl, but because she has a potentially fatal illness, and it could be her first time and potentially her last time. When she tells the guy this, he obviously kind of gets a little bit freaked out. She's right, this could be her first and last time. And that's a massive thing to put on someone, even though he does kind of do the usual boy thing of, oh well, don't worry, you'll enjoy it. And, you know, he does seem like a nice guy, he does seem like a kind guy, but because of this whole revelation, I wonder if he's going to back off a little bit. but he has been into Emma ever since he turned up. So maybe while he's sticking around, he and Emma might actually be able to get down to business, I suppose is the best way to put it. Back to the whole situation with Norma and Dylan now. Norma ends up going over to see Caleb, but when she gets to the hotel that he's at, she just cannot bring herself to do anything. She ends up getting really emotional, as Norma mainly does, and she drives back. However, we start to see that jealous streak in Norman really starting to come out, because his mother ends up on a date. So in the last episode, we saw that Norma's new friend Christine was trying to set her up with her brother George, and it seems like everything between the two of them has been going okay. Norma doesn't want to push things too much though. And so when Christine calls her and asks her to come out to dinner with them, Norma ends up going. She reluctantly goes and goes with George. However, when George comes to pick her up, Norman answers the door. And we see straight away that he gets a little bit possessive and he's asking when his mother coming back home. And because George doesn't really understand the connection between Norma and Norman, he tries to play it off as a joke and basically tells him, "Don't worry, we won't get into any trouble." But now Norman is thinking about the fact that his mother is out on a date with someone. When he ends up speaking to his new friend Cody, she basically tells him that, well, if there's a problem that your mum has, we need to go and sort it. And obviously the main problem in town right now is the fact that Caleb is back in town. So she basically sets him up to go and meet up with Caleb and beat him up. She tells him that she will go along with him and she'll help out. But once Norman gets there, very much like his mother, he backs away. He says he can't do it, he can't go in there, he definitely can't confront this man. Cody, a little bit disappointed, drives him all the way back to the Bates Motel, but when he gets there, he finds both Dylan and Norma fighting. Once again, they're at each other's throats, and basically, he is accusing Norma of lying again, because Dylan has been to see Caleb, and Caleb, who had already borrowed money off Dylan, ends up giving him the money back, and tells him, look, I was only trying to protect your mum. Nothing like that ever happened between the two of us. She got pregnant in high school and she ended up getting with a guy who she essentially tricked into marrying her because she was pregnant with you. But Caleb claims that he has nothing to do with any of it. But again, this causes fractures between Norma and Dylan, and the situation is just a complete mess. Nobody's listening to either party, and Dylan just wants to walk away from the whole thing. Of course, Norman hears the conversation, and when he does, he decides that, well, it's time. Norman ends up going back to the motel room. He manages to get in, but this time we see that fracture. We finally see the Norma persona come out of Norman, and he basically tells him, look, you were the one who did this to me. You raped me on many occasions and you made me pregnant. And he basically lashes out at him. But Caleb is a hell of a lot bigger and stronger, manages to take Norman down, and basically tells Norman that he's leaving town anyway, so why don't he just fucking go? So Caleb leaves, and Norman is left crumpled in a heap, clutching his stomach, and we aren't really sure which persona he is at that particular point. We can only assume that he's still Norma. Episode 2, The Escape Artist. So, in the previous episode, Cody had actually written her number on Norman's arm, so after he comes out of this trance that he has been sat in, someone in a restaurant has called Cody and managed to get her to come and pick him up. He doesn't know where he is and is a little bit disorientated, but Cody manages to guide him through it. At first he tells her that he hasn't had anything like that happen before, but eventually he manages to open up to her. He spends a lot of time with Cody in this episode, and when Norma actually meets Cody, she is a little bit shocked at the way that Cody acts. She isn't happy with the fact that Norman is hanging out with this girl. But Norman tells her it's only until the production is done, and then they probably won't see each other again. So Cody ends up coming over and taking Norman to basically go and help on this production. But then she remembers she's left something at home. Norman suggests they go back, and they do. But once they get there, Norman realises why Cody doesn't want to be at home. Cody's father starts to yell and scream at her, and she ends up running out of the house. Cody then suggests that maybe her and Norman don't go to this production and instead just bunk off and go and have a good time. She's got some beers with her, and she's now got $600 on hip, so they could just hang out. They end up heading over to a meadow where Cody has this treehouse. They head up into the treehouse, and instantly you can see the attraction between the two of them, and they end up having sex. Norman, it seems, isn't the only one who ends up getting some in this episode because, well, so does Emma. Emma ends up hooking up with the drug dealer that she met before, and, well, it seems that he's been really nice to her. Like I said before, he is a really sweet guy by the looks of things, and it looks like he's going to look after her. But before she does that, she ends up asking Norma about losing her virginity and what it feels like to have sex. She tells Norma that she's already looked online, and she's not got anyone really to look up to. Her dad's there, but she's not going to talk to her dad about this, and Norma seems like the kind of person that she could approach about this kind of thing. Norma tells her, with the right person, it's incredible. Obviously, Norma didn't have the right person originally. And this kind of makes Emma feel a little bit better about things because this guy is probably a good guy, apart from the drug dealing, obviously. Now, in the last episode, Sheriff Romero and Dylan's boss, Zane, actually ended up at loggerheads because, well, Zane thinks that he basically runs this town, even though he's just basically, okay, he's a drug dealer, but he doesn't run the whole operation. And so he's getting a little bit too big for his boots. And so at the end of the last episode, he ended up burning down Romero's house, which means Romero is going to be out for vengeance. He manages to find Zane and ends up kicking the absolute shit out of him because, well, Zane kind of deserves it. He is strutting around quite aggressively around town and acting like a dick not just to Romero but to the people that he works with, including Dylan. But as we know, Romero isn't someone that you really want to fuck around with. He will end up destroying that business if Zane keeps messing him up. Norma once again is trying to fight off this bypass that is coming through town. She goes to speak to Nick Ford, and he has managed to pay off an environmental guy who has basically forged a report by the looks of things. Norma goes over to see this guy, and he basically tells her that there is an endangered species that is right in the way of this bypass. And if she hands in this report that he has made, then they can stop the bypass, at least for a little bit, and obviously that will help Norma fight this thing tooth and nail. So she is obviously ecstatic, but Romero cautions Norma against working with Ford because he's such a bad guy, and all that's going to happen is he's going to end up getting Norma into trouble as well. We find out how bad he is at the end of the episode when all of a sudden one of the town council members, who was someone who had been blocking this from Norma, ends up dead. And it's just such a shock to Norma to actually have this happen. It wasn't what she was expecting, and now people are dying because of this whole bypass thing. She thought it was just going to be handing in reports from the EPA, but it's not. This is going to be a lot more serious than she actually realises. Dylan, however, has now moved out, and after everything that's happened with Caleb is gone, and so he has turned his mind back to his job. However, while he's walking through town, Zane, once again, who has been antagonising another group of drug dealers in the area, ends up getting shot at in a drive-by shooting. Dylan manages to protect him, but when he starts drawing his gun as this car comes back down the street, Dylan thinks that he will manage to stop the car, but the car just doesn't stop. It plows straight through him, and Dylan ends up in hospital. Of course, no one else knows other than the people who are around him, and so Dylan ends up meeting Zane's sister Jodie, who claims she is the mastermind behind the drug business in the area, and she just wants to thank Dylan for everything that he's done so far. Episode 6, Plunge. So as we spoke about, Dylan has now met his big boss, a woman named Jodie. She takes him over to her house and she is very appreciative of what he's done, but she knows that her brother Zane isn't exactly up to scratch when it comes to being the boss. And she basically tells him, look, I need someone to come in and fill in that role. I don't want to move Zane out of the way, but just kind of watch him, make sure that he is on the right path. And so essentially she asks Dylan if he will run the operation for her, but behind her brother's back, which is obviously going to cause issues with Zane because Zane's a fucking nutcase from what we've seen. But there's also a lot of chemistry between the two of them, and then she ends up taking advantage of him. I'm sure he didn't mind, because the feelings seem quite mutual. As for Norma, after the town council member had actually been murdered, she tries to distance herself from Nick Ford, but he eventually just manages to pull her back in, because now there is an open position on the council, which means she can get in there and she can basically have a say in what happens. She has to get elected first, but of course she's got backing from her friend Christine, and she's going to end up being coached by George, Christine's brother, into how to come across well and basically get this role. So of course now things are starting to look up a little bit more, and this friendship with Nick Ford is really working out well for her. However, when she ends up going to meet the chairman of the council and they sit down and talk about what's going on, he essentially doesn't tell her outright, but he kind of gives her a hint that you should be watching your back right now. But Norma is so naive and so kind of wanting her own agenda that she just doesn't even think about what's going on. He basically tells her to watch her back around Nick Ford, but she is Norma and she just wants to get on the council so that she can close this road down and help out her own business. But of course, if you end up in cahoots with someone like Nick Ford, who is a very powerful man, something's got to give. And that's the thing that Norma isn't understanding right now. Cody and Norman's relationship is starting to go a little bit from strength to strength, but we're not sure how strong it's actually going to be in the end, because while he and Cody are having fun, they head out one day and they head down to the river. They start making out, and then all of a sudden Emma and the pot dealer turn up. They have also been going from strength to strength. Emma tells them that they can go and they can move down the river a bit further and then they can just leave them to their day, but Cody insists that they hang out. They end up doing one of those rope swings and swinging off into the river, but Emma is a little bit freaked out by it. At first, Norman doesn't want to do it, but he gets goaded into it by Cody because she essentially says, well, I'm going to do it, so why don't you? And it's this kind of letting his hair down that could make someone like Norman unwind a little bit. However, as soon as Emma starts saying that she wants to try it as well, and obviously with her issues, it wouldn't exactly be advisable for her to be jumping into cold water without her oxygen tank. Probably wouldn't be advisable with it either, but it's not strapped to her back and she's not in a wetsuit. So she ends up jumping off even though Norman is railing against it. However, as soon as she hits the water, you know something's wrong. She doesn't come back up, and eventually when she does, she's panicking and she looks worried. Norman has dived in to try and help her, and he drags her out and basically blames Gunnar, who is the dealer, and Cody for making her do this. He obviously cares for Emma, but has never actually felt any romantic feelings for her. But we know her situation. She does have romantic feelings for Norman. After everything that happened, Norman goes off on both Emma and Gunnar. He keeps telling them how irresponsible they were, and they end up going back home. Cody is then so worried about Norman, she goes to see Emma. She essentially apologizes and then eventually tells her about Norman's blackouts and how it's happened a few times before. Emma says that she's maybe seen him do it once, but nothing major. She doesn't think it's a major thing, but now that someone else has brought it up and it's on separate occasions, there might be something to it. Cody doesn't want to tell Norma because, well, Norma doesn't like her. Because earlier on in the episode, Cody had got into it with Norma, and Norma had basically said, you shouldn't be doing things like that with my son, i.e. drinking, because they drank in the last episode, because, well, Norman shouldn't be doing anything like that. He's special. And so now Emma is worried. After what Cody's told her, and the fact that she doesn't want to go to Norma about it, Emma decides that she will instead. She gives Norma a call and tells her exactly what's happened. Norma isn't exactly enthused by this, and when she finds out that Norman is literally about to take his driving test, she goes over, she stops it, and she says, if someone was having blackout episodes, would you be able to let them drive? The instructor immediately gets out of the car and walks away and says, no, that wouldn't be something that I would do. And so, once again, we've seen Norma fuck things up for Norman, but in this case, it's probably valid because he shouldn't be driving if he is having these episodes. And so, now that he's found out that Cody has basically ratted him out, he goes to see her, but he goes over to her dad's place. And once again, her dad is not a good guy. As soon as Norman gets through the door, he's yelling and screaming at Cody, and, well, her dad comes out. He basically starts threatening Cody for having a boy round who's yelling the odds, and when he starts to get physical with her, Norman manages to pipe up. However, once again, he gets smacked in the face because, well, he's not very well built. I'm not saying that there isn't a way he could get an upper hand on him, because there probably is if he had that kind of training, but he doesn't. He gets smacked straight in the face, and his next move is to basically barrel into this guy. When he does, however, he ends up pushing him down some stairs, and as Cody's dad hits the bottom of the stairs, we just hear a crack, and her dad, it seems, is lifeless. Episode 7, Presumed Innocent. So it seems that even though there was plenty of competition to actually get onto the town council, Norma didn't actually have to do a lot. It turns out that she could just go and have a chat with the mayor, who I thought was the chairman, and just go and, I'm on the town council now. So, I mean, if it was only that easy, I'm sure there would be a lot of people right now trying to get onto their own town councils to drive out certain people, but she now has her own office in the town council's office. By the look of her face, it's not much, but it's a start. However, before she can get settled, Romero turns up and tells Norma about the death of Cody's dad, and essentially that Norman is involved. We see Norman being taken to the police station to be questioned, and he and Cody are obviously travelling in different cars so that their story stays separate. Norma, of course, is typical Norma. She heads over to the police station, and instead of actually being calm about this and just letting the police get on with things, she's yelling, she's screaming, she's having a go at the desk sergeant and just being an absolute menace until the point when Romero can actually speak to her properly. Because obviously he can't discuss the case any further than the fact that Norman's been arrested. Norman, however, tells the story as it is, and that he was just trying to defend Cody and that her dad was being a menace towards her, and, well, he ended up pushing him and he went down the stairs, and that was it. He mentioned his blackouts, but his mother says, well, you shouldn't mention your blackouts. It's not exactly the done thing. Like, people will start to ask questions, and we don't want that to happen. And so when Norma sees Cody coming into the police station, she manages to get some time alone with her in the bathroom. She essentially begs Cody not to say anything about Norman's issues, to which Cody agrees. Cody, however, now she's an orphan, is going to be moving. Her aunt lives down in Indiana, and she's been essentially told that that is where she will be moving to, because she is a minor still. But she comes over to see Norman before she actually goes, and she tells him what happened between her and Norma. When he asks what exactly she said about these blackouts and what Cody actually knows from what Norma said, she says, I don't really know anything, but I know that it absolutely terrifies Norma. So she just says that you black out and you change and something comes over you, but whatever it is terrifying to your mother. So maybe you need to investigate that and speak to her about this. When he goes and speaks to Norma, however, she is all highly praising of Cody and how well she handled the police, right up until the point when Norman says, she told me what you said and I want to know what's going on. Of course, Norma blows it all out of proportion and essentially, after praising the girl, says how much of a troublemaker she was and how much of a bad kid she is and how much of a piece of shit, blah, 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 blah. Oddly enough, same shit that the president pulls right now when he talks about people and basically says, well, you know, he's my best friend, he's a good guy, he's this, that and the other. And then 2 minutes later, he's slagging you off. But anyway, after everything, Norman is eventually released and Cody's father's death is ruled as an accident. So it looks like Norman has potentially got away with everything again. Dylan, however, has now started to look out after Zane because, well, Zane is crazy. And I know there was an opportunity for me to say Zane is zany, but I'm a bigger person than that. And so Zane is insane in the membrane, and he is going to be a real pain in the arse for Dylan while he is looking after him. And when he tells Dylan that they are going to go over and raid Nick Ford's warehouse and basically take over because, well, Nick Ford is a drug dealer as well, or at least it's believed that he is. He is another big bad in town. Dylan essentially tries to make sure that he reins him in. But Zane isn't going to let that happen. He knows that his sister has probably had a word with him and, well, that's not the way things are going to happen. And so, essentially, Zane threatens Dylan and Remo as well, Dylan's friend, and tells Dylan that they're going to go out to this warehouse and they're going to raid it. They're going to kill everyone in sight if they have to. Once they get there, however, Dylan tries to reason with him and Zane says, look, you're either with me or you're against me. Either way, you're going to get hurt in this. Because when Dylan tells him that he is against him, he hits him in the face with the butt of the gun and Dylan goes down. He's left unconscious outside a place where Zane essentially walks inside and starts shooting up. And anyone who gets in his way is going to get killed. So now not only does Sheriff Romero have the fact that his house has been burned down, he now has another incident out at Nick Ford's warehouse. And things get worse for him when he gets a phone call from one of his deputies. They tell him that they have run Norman Bates' DNA through their system and they've come up with a match. the second semen sample that was inside Blair Watson has come back as Norman Bates. And so now, Norman, after killing someone already, is back in the frame for killing someone else. So, this has been a very interesting 4 episodes, and I've really been enjoying this series so far. I think my only problem would be is that they're letting this character of Cody go pretty quickly. She was quite an interesting character, and I think if she'd had more time to develop, things wouldn't have been as simple for Norman. I know she doesn't come back in later series, and it is a shame that she didn't, because I think the influence that she has on Norman is quite interesting. But then again, I suppose that's the whole point about Norman's character. He has these women in his life like Bradley and now Cody that end up clashing with his mother and end up being someone that his mother just doesn't get on with. She'll never get on with anyone that actually comes sniffing around her son, but then again, neither will Norman. Now that Norma has George around her and he is offering her help at all turns, Norman is getting very jealous of this. But it's a similar situation with Norma. She gets jealous whenever he has a girl around. She didn't like Bradley because she was too upfront, and she came to the house and she came to see a new boy that was in town. She didn't like Cody because she was too loud and she was too brash. The only one she does kind of like is Emma, and I don't think she realises how much Emma actually likes Norman. And I suppose the way to think about it with Emma is the fact that she has MS. And all Norma can think is, well, she can't have that long. And therefore, if my son does end up with her, he's not going to have it for long, so it doesn't really matter. So anything long term to her looks like a threat, whereas Emma really doesn't. As for everything else around it, I like the way that they are embellishing more on Sheriff Romero and how he runs his town. However, it's one of those usual tropes that it seemed like quite an idyllic place until all of a sudden the two main characters turn up and then all of a sudden everything just goes to shit. But it is very interesting to watch Sheriff Romero going around town and handling his business. He is very no-nonsense, and, we've seen him shoot someone in the previous season, and we've seen him punch out a drug dealer in this one. So he's not unwilling to get his hands dirty. Dylan is having a very interesting story arc as well. I feel like it is a little bit rushed along. I mean, essentially, he met with Jodie and she told him to go and look after her brother, but as soon as Zane catches a whiff of this, he's like, well, I know that you're looking out for me. And it was in basically the same episode. So it just feels a little bit rushed from that, but I mean, it's going to be interesting, the dynamic between the two of them, because Zane does look the type of person that is going to just do things the way that he wants to do them. However, his method isn't going to actually cut water when it comes to people like Nick Ford, because Nick Ford won't fuck around. We've seen that he has killed someone already, and that was a councilman, and so he's not going to be too bothered when it's a low-life criminal like Zane. But this has been very interesting and very fun to watch, and I'm so pleased that I'm revisiting this show, and I cannot wait to get into the last 3 episodes, because that's going to be the wrap-up of the season, and then I can continue with season 3. But anyway, I'm done for today. I'm done rambling at you guys, and I appreciate everything that you do and that you'll hear from me, and I'm very appreciative of everything that's going on right now. But as for today, I'm done. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, liking, sharing, subscribing, all that good shit. But until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye. As always, thank you for listening to this podcast, and you could really help me and the podcast by giving a like, share, subscribe on all major platforms that you listen to podcasts on. As an independent podcaster, this will just help me exponentially when it comes to actually doing more things with this podcast. I truly do enjoy this, and I absolutely love revisiting these TV shows with you guys. So any engagement from you is always welcome, and I will try and listen to all of you when you give suggestions or just tell me what you think about the podcast. But once again, thank you for listening, and until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye.